Welcome to MindStand Pod, a series exploring workplaces and diving into cultures that make them tick. Each of our seasons will dive into unique factors of business, provide great stories from leaders in human capital, and offer helpful insights you can use today to impact your company.
Welcome to another MindStand Pod. We have the amazing Chiriga Zomo, Army Veteran Proclaimed Doerpreneur, head of Grow with Zomo. I want to make sure I say that correctly. Head CEO and founder of Grow with Zomo, a minority-owned, veteran-owned business focused on innovating DEI within the hospitality industry. I mean, decorated in your career, writer for Meetings Today, consultant for Tourism Diversity Matters. We have someone who served not only for our country, but served for people who want to learn more about inclusive perspectives. Thank you and welcome to the show, Zoe.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's always a little humbling, or it's hard to hear when someone's giving you your flowers right in front of you. Like, what do you do? Like, thank you. Like you said, it's about serving people, and as you learn about people, you just want to make sure that not only do they feel like they belong, but that they're included, they're able to have power, and that they're empowered. And so, yeah, as I learn about, you know, all the different resources, I'm like, let's amplify this. Let's make sure that everybody hears the word. And education. I think education is that tool. Turn it that way. Education is that tool that I want to make. I want to make education the virus, that's infectious. So,
I mean, and we've seen a world over the past 24 months, prioritize education, information design. How do you ensure that at-risk people get the information they need to save their lives? And what you're saying is the same way that we can spread information should be the same way education should be valued. We were just having a great conversation on accessibility and how sometimes that could be an underrated perspective of DEI.
yeah, it is. And at first, like I like to be as honest as possible. When this acronym DEI is often talked about like a monolith, right? Like there it is, DEI over there, but we don't unpack it. So what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Like, so what I try to do is define each term, diversity being all the ways and all the different characteristics. Equity is making sure that everyone has the resources that they need. And then inclusion, which can sometimes be this problematic word, is about the balance and distribution of power, right? It's not about one group allowing another group to come in. It's about that balance of power, right? And I thought initially that inclusion meant, hey, that means, of course, we're talking about everybody. But the more I learned about digital accessibility, I realized how important it is it's DEI and A, or DEIA, right? So that we really have a focus on accessibility, and specifically in the case that we were talking about is digital accessibility, right? Like, as an event planner, that's where I got my start. That's where I got my interest in, the hospitality and events and tourism industry. You learn that physical spaces are not accessible. But now, like you said, in the last 24 months, as we merge into virtual and hybrid events, these platforms that are emerging are not accessible. And, people assuming I'm just going to throw up some automated captions or I'm going to use an overlay. What we're trying to do is use education to say, no, overlays are not acceptable. And, there is no quick fix. Instead, you referred to, I was putting in the chat, the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, to design your platforms from the onset, from the beginning stages, to be accessible, right? And then if you don't have someone in the room that's an advisor and to accessibility, or an advocate for persons with disabilities, they need to be in the room.
Absolutely. You have such, I bet so many people in the DEI and just culture space, and you have such a unique perspective. What we see, or what I've seen, is a lot of people trying to explain the business case for DEI in the workplace, in healthcare, in startup culture. you are addressing DEI in hospitality, literally how
Mhm.
people live, how people feel. And hospitality, I mean, as we all know, is very much linked towards how much money do I need to spend to feel included, to feel like
Mhm.
my needs are being met. Are you seeing new trends or developments in terms of DEI and hospitality?
I feel like there is a shift, and I say that with caution because sometimes a shift as dramatic as it's been in the last 24 months can lead to performative gestures, right? And so the work that I'm doing is how can we make sure that our commitment, our express commitment to DI is going to be measurable and sustainable. And so that's why I call myself a hospitality, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategist. Let's strategically talk about what needs to happen, right? And so in terms of, AI or digital accessibility within the hospitality meetings and events industry, like I said, that focus on virtual and hybrid events, that's how it's not going anywhere. And frankly, it shouldn't, because what the virtual and hybrid access does, or option does for our events, is it helps us to cast a wider net. There have always been people unable to attend events, whether it's because of physical or functional limitations, or social economic barriers, or just scheduling conflicts, not being able to bring their kids to conferences. So now virtual and hybrid events allow for more people to attend. You have a wider audience. So that's one aspect of accessibility. But now that these platforms are more popularized, we need the tools to be available. And we need to think through the lens and from the perspective of someone that has a hearing, a visual, disability, and how we're going to address that. The unfortunate aspect of this major shift is that companies have invested so much in their platforms, and they're thinking about accessibility as an afterthought, which is going to cost them more money. And so what disability advocates are saying, like my colleague Samantha Evans is saying, and is think about it from the very beginning. And then if you've already gotten yourself deep into, doing business with a company who has sold you an overlay, or you have gotten so deep into your investment that it is an afterthought, don't get defensive. In a sense, hear what advocates are saying, and let's talk about strategically what needs to be done moving forward.
So many great points to what you said. It's almost like the perpetual impact of not having accessibility.
Absolutely.
Leaders won't even know how much money, how many bad experiences they're leaving on the table because they haven't put, like you said, accessibility as a first thought, not a forethought.
Right, right. And that's interesting. When I hear the business case for diversity, I feel like this, and it's going to take some time, but I feel like the term itself, the phrase itself, has been co-opted, right? And so I see people's fear around attaching DEI to ROI, because it comes across as if you are attaching a dollar or a value to people who have been historically or are presently marginalized. And when I'm saying the business case for diversity, that's not what I mean at all. Instead, the business case is, let's look at the initiatives, the programs, the tools and resources that you have in place. And are they valuable to the people that you said you're committed to serving, right? And if they're not, this tool that you're investing in is costing you more money. And so that doesn't fit along with your business strategy or your goals. You've invested in something that is causing more harm than good, right? So we need to assess that particular initiative, resource, or tool and strategically look at a way to make sure that it's not doing that, right? That it's not harming people. And so that I look at the business case as, an assessment and an analysis of what has been implemented. Is it really working? And when we want to find if it's really working, we have to measure it. Has this, if we're talking about overlays, how many people does that prevent from actually accessing your platform? So if you want to cast a wider net, if you want more people to access your platform, that overlay is actually creating a barrier, and you've caused more harm, or you've added to the problem instead of actually being an ally or someone in solidarity.
Wow. For some reason, I just have this feeling that this isn't the first time you've explained the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as accessibility. Could you name some of the organizations, some of the
Mhm.
opportunities you've had to really share, your learnings and expertise in this space?
Well, I start with Meeting Professionals International, right, which is a trade association, organization. It's member based. And so it's based in Texas, and it's an international organization. So it has chapters in Europe and in Canada and across the US. So over 70 chapters. Now, the members, or the target audience for an association like that, is every company that you can think of, from I've been in the room with Marriott, I've been in the room with Hilton, what we call destination management companies or organizations, or conventions and visitors bureau. I've been in Tampa, I've been in Mexico, and everybody in the room, from national sales director to corporate event planners to independent planners. And so as of recently, shameless plug, yesterday just launched an event DEI strategist course with a platform called Event Leadership Institute. And that same reach are those same individuals who are working at hotels, venues, AV companies that want to know how to strategically implement DEI into their business. And, I want to talk, we talk about everything from how to write anti-racism policies to making sure that you have accessibility tools built into the platforms. But the latest conversation with this organization and all the members of it is around consumer power and partnership accountability.
So recognizing the innate value that the customer has, and then using that to almost forecast how to build your business with them, with those perspectives in mind.
Yeah, like because it's an ecosystem, right? Every industry is, or just business as an ecosystem. So us as consumers, like if and when, because it's bound to happen that we collaborate, grow with Zomo and MindStand. Like we already have the inclusive language, project that's out there. As we build together, as we do any project together, as I learn, if I'm holding you accountable to what I learn and vice versa, then we're benefiting our entire ecosystem. So as a consumer, the power that I have, if I'm going to use any resource or tool and I learn that it's not accessible, then the power that I have is, hey, I can't continue my subscription, I can't continue my partnership until you address accessibility. And if you don't know, here's how I'm going to leverage education to help you. Here's some ways, here's a guideline for you to follow. Same with if I see that you don't have any representation of people who identify as transgender, if you don't have someone from the LGBT community, if your language is not inclusive, right? Like I'm going to hold you accountable to doing better, but not just an express commitment to doing better, actionable, strategic ways that you can do better. And it's very solution driven.
And I highly encourage everyone listening to sign up for the Inclusive Language Challenge, an ongoing way to, like you said, really look at how you communicate between one another. So looking back at your Slack workspace, whether it's been the past 3 months or from the beginning of the pandemic, work with MindStand and grow with Zomo to upload that conversational data and receive data-driven insights on how you can implement inclusive language and the business impact it can have in your organization. I'd love to circle back on that topic again. Working with companies with 10,000 employees down to 200. What excited you? What business case do you see for a tool like MindStand?
Oh, look, there's so many. Okay, so you all are busy out here just getting awards and getting programs and accelerators. I don't want to put too much on your plate, but starting from where, when we first met on Clubhouse, the initial was exactly what you already offer is how can we help teams, again, assess where they are, right? Recognize things they don't know about their communication, and oftentimes people don't realize that communication is at the heart of DEI. If people communicate differently and they're not realizing that their words, again, are causing harm or, really creating a culture that is exclusive, then they need an assessment. And that assessment reveals, oh, okay, here are some things that we notice. And what I see with MindStand is, again, it uses education. Hey, you might want to use this word. Hey, we recognize that this word has been used and the response has been next. So that report is golden. It's a golden ticket. Again, while we use red flags and sometimes red flags make people feel like, get defensive, red flags are an opportunity for growth, right? If you don't recognize something in this analysis, this report that MindStand provides says, here are some opportunities for growth, then you can start removing that word from your lexicon, have a list of alternatives. So like when we did that session together for MPI Carolinas, which is a chapter within the entire organization, we talked about the word guys. Oftentimes when someone's before a room or on a Zoom and there's, all kinds of people, a diverse group of people in the room or on the call, and just out of like default, just people say, hey guys, right? And see nothing wrong with it because it's so common in our lexicon. But the more and more we talk about gender identity, non-binary, and patriarchal language, or language that is male dominated, I start with this. Why do you use the term guys? Do you know the history with the term guys? And in a program or tech like MindStand helps people recognize, hey, you use guys this often, but the representation within your workplace, there are 50% women, 50% who identify as male, or 10% who identify as non-binary. Is guys the best term? Or are there alternative words such as folks, people, everybody, everyone? So it's not just to say to you, hey, you're a bad person. It's say, hey, why don't you think about that word? Is that word the most effective? Is it the most powerful? Is it empowering people within your workplace? So yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I saw with MindStand is an analysis tool, because I don't think that any strategy or initiative that people want to implement should begin without an analysis. Something to benchmark where they are and say, okay, now here are the steps for how we want to grow.
You said it better than I have.
No, you always break it down. I just get excited when you're talking because the bubbles, the light bulbs just keep going off because I see all the ways that we can work together, yeah. And you mentioned, sorry, I can keep going. The other aspect to it is, directly as it relates to marketing events, this is the opportunity that I see for the future of MindStand and Grow with Zomo is, event planners are constantly pushing out marketing and whether it be social media platforms, we do less and less print, but a lot of wording, a lot of, target, marketing and segmented marketing. And so how do you reach an audience if you're not aware that your language is harmful, right? How do you, define these terms within your company to make sure that you understand the power behind pronouns, right? Like what that does when, I have on my Zoom that you see now, I have my pronouns. I do that for multiple reasons. One, to let people know that I am passionate about DEI, but also in case there's someone on the Zoom or in the room who is hiding themselves out of protection or for fear of self-identifying and being, feeling, like an other or being othered, I invite them to be their whole selves, So when we are our authentic selves, when we're liberated to be free with our identity, we invite others to do the same. And so educating people on pronouns. And so I feel like inclusive, or that MindStand with this inclusive language and AI can help people who are marketing events, building out websites and content and copy, check their language, making sure that they're being inclusive.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to focus on a specific group. I think that was the real excitement that we saw with MindStand. When you think of, DEI, all too often, people often think it's only focused on the minority experience. Exactly to what you said. There are people who are motivated, loyal, happy to work within an organization.
Mhm.
And a part of that is receiving that education on the workplace that I'm in now looks completely different than my first week at this company, which was 20 years ago, which was 10 years ago. There's so much new things, external factors that I'm seeing. And it's not because of a bad reason. People understand this. It's not because of a bad idea. It's because people are feeling more comfortable sharing themselves and sharing that level of comfort that everyone wants to see in the world. So
Yeah.
MindStand is just such an exciting way to have the chief people officer inform the CEO on what the diverse landscape of their company looks like, as well as supervisors to see for the teams they're managing, have I done a great job on help educate them so that burnout, so that resignation doesn't have to be a sad point of our yearly reporting.
Yeah, I mean that you talk about it so well. It's the culture of an organization, right? When I was in the military, so I was in the Army for 12 years, and every time a new command would take over, we would do a climate assessment. And that was, again, you measure the temperature of the troops, of, how processes and procedures, are people being taken care of? So that same aspect, within organizations as a civilian, I use that term, is doing these climate assessments, doing these culture analysis to learn, are people being served, right? And so when you do these assessments and you find out that there are, silos, or there's groups within the larger group that are not being served, it will match up with your attrition rate. It will match up with how people are optimized. It will match up if people actually show up on a project and contribute. Because if these barriers exist within an organization because people are not invited to be their whole selves, or encouraged or empowered to be their whole selves, then if you want to talk again about the business case for diversity or the ROI, you're investing in someone, but creating barriers at the same time, right? And so we have to do these analyses. We have to be aware. And when that awareness is brought to our attention, or when something is brought to our attention, I've been talking a lot more about emotional intelligence. People have to know how to respond to, hey, this is not an attack on you. Like you said, it's not about you're a bad person, you had a bad idea, and how dare you not think about this group and that group. It's an opportunity for a growth, for you to recognize as someone that is non-disabled, I didn't know. What do I need to know? What steps do I need to take? And I've, talked to Samantha today, actually, and we were talking about the difference between checking the box and having a checklist, right? Checking the box is where you work to learn what's on, what you have to do and why you have to implement it. Versus a checklist says, hey, these are the things you need to learn. This is why we're implementing. And these are, this is the progressive and incremental ways that you can improve. And so, yeah, I'm always coming up with hashtags like check box versus checklist, so yeah, I mean, we want to, what I do love about this conversation, I'm there's an influencer on LinkedIn by the name of Madison Butler. And I mean, I believe their pronouns are they. But Madison she's a powerhouse. And one of the things that she posted, I believe today, We know how the algorithm works. It could have been last week, but today I believe she posted, let's be sure when we have the conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, that we don't center it on the comfort of whiteness. And it was like you sit with that for a moment and you're thinking, do I do that? And what does that mean? It doesn't, I don't get jarred where I get defensive. I think about how am I doing, when I'm having this conversation, am I centering the conversation around digital accessibility around non-disabled people and their comfort? It's not about the comfort of the person that needs to do better, right? It's about being very real about why these changes must take place, right? And so the evolution of DEI as a discipline started from, a society that was segregated. And, civil rights activists, specifically, NAACP, Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement was, again, about addressing segregation within the US. So that's where the movement stems from. And so as we talk about the reality of our society and these barriers that exist in society, we can't have a comfortable conversation. It's not going to be comfortable. A lot of people are going to have to recognize their power and privilege. And once they recognize that, how can you leverage it? Whether you're in tech, whether you are non-disabled, whether you're wealthy, how can you leverage that power and privilege to create a more accessible society, period? So let's have that conversation, right? Let's not try to, skirt it. Let's not try to navigate it in a way that gets comfortable. Let's have and that's what that statement means. It means let's have a direct conversation. And if you can't handle it, if it's too hot to handle, get a fan to cool yourself off, because we're gonna have this conversation, So yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying what I'm learning. Is it challenging? Yes, of course, because every time I do, I post a picture on social media, I have to pause and remember to put alt text, or to make sure that my PowerPoint slide has alt text. Or if I'm doing a video, like right now, are we going to be live captioning this when it gets posted? You got to make sure that we are looking at that checklist to make sure that we are serving the people that that are not in the room and that want access to this content so that they can learn too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zoe. I think it's already been very clear just so far in the recording for everyone listening, but I think it's worth asking anyway. What would you label as your superpower?
I have a hashtag for that. Let me clear my throat. My hashtag is counsel, not cancel. So COUNSEL, not cancel. And I use this hashtag to recognize that everyone has different styles. I love my counselors out there, the ones who are out there slashing and cutting heads off. It has to happen. It's not my style. It's not my superpower. And that comes from my upbringing. I grew up in predominantly white institutions. I grew up, in the military. I turned 21 in the military when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was legalized, and if you're not familiar with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that's where you're not free to, be LGBTQ IA in the military. Growing up in predominantly white institutions through elementary, junior high, and high school. So I was around people from dominant or groups that have power and privilege, and very good people who were unaware of the harm that that they're causing, whether it's microaggressions or it's actual direct actions. And at the same time, my neighborhood was Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and so I lived in two different worlds. And on both sides of the fence, amazing people, not to sound like Donald Trump at all, but amazing people who just weren't educated either beyond history or on how to be inclusive of each other, or how to, leverage where they were or their education to, actually be fruitful, to really make sure that integration is beneficial and it's not encouraging people to assimilate or conform. And so when you're in the middle, all my life, I feel like I've always been in the middle of these situations. And I believe in the power of education. right? And so if we're really talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we understand systemic oppression, we look at our education system, and it has not been an education that has taught people about institutionalized racism. Like that's like speaking a foreign language to people who only, who don't understand that this institution, that this society that we were in is not built for everyone, right? And that creates barriers in housing and education. So I always want to learn what wasn't taught and be able to educate in a way that we can have a dialogue over. Let's have a conversation. And yeah, so counsel, not cancel is a way that I approach, okay, let me identify again, analyze what you don't know, and then teach it in a way that's going to have you receive it, right? And then once you learn, now you're accountable for what you know, and I will be a resource. I will share an article, I'll share a documentary, I'll share a name of someone that maybe will speak to you in a different way. And that may not be the same, conversation that I'm going to have with the CFO in a company, or I may have with somebody who's from another country, that my conversation is not changing because I'm diluting what I have to say, but that I know how to engage with the audience that I'm speaking to. That to me is a superpower.
I couldn't agree more. That will be the title of this episode. That was an amazing, you recognize where you're from, and just what you said, millions of people of invisible or visible disability, of any forms of race, gender, sex orientation, have to make a choice on, when I see people who identify with me or don't identify with me, will they be canceled? Will I distance myself from them and live my life kind of purposefully oblivious towards another group of people? And that takes away from that inclusive piece we explained earlier in DEI. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's a great way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's multiple ways, right? I mainly on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite often. So you can Chiriga, Chiriga, quotation marks, Zoe, not Zoe, last name Moore, Moore. Instagram is Grow with Zomo. Pretty much if you put Grow with Zomo in anywhere, you'll find me. I'm not an influencer, so maybe I'm not that popular, but yeah, Zoe, Zoe, Moore, email strategy@growwithzomo.com. And yeah, my number is 413-353-GROW. I love grow because I want to associate everything with growth. If you think about planting seeds, when you plant a seed in the soil, you have to water it, you have to provide it sun, you have to nurture it, and it's a process. So as we learn about how to better serve each other and create a more inclusive society, recognize that it's a process, and that will have more people counseling. And again, I will say this as a caveat, that counseling is not the burden of everyone, right? It especially for being from a marginalized community. I say this all the time, that it is not easy. It is not easy to be the person who has to speak to a room that doesn't understand or that is not receptive. So it is not the burden of everyone, but because I've identified myself as an advocate and as a strategist, that's why I take on, this endeavor. And I do so with caution in and of myself, because I also need to pay attention to my mental health and well-being. But yeah, so Grow with Zomo. We're learning and we're growing together.
Absolutely. And just geographically, I know we've been interviewing people from across the country. Where is a good place for someone to grab a cup of coffee with you?
Ooh, there is this coffee shop. No, just like, I'm in Marietta, Georgia, near the Battery, so about 15 minutes outside of Atlanta. There are so many restaurants here that I want to go to. So you just say a restaurant and I'm there. There's a Chattahoochee River has this amazing coffee shop right on the water. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. Coffee's delicious. There's several places. Just let me know you're in Atlanta and let's meet up. I need to get out the house more anyway. So yeah. Let's
Yes,
do it. I always say,
please.
let's grow together, right?
Thank you. Well, my last question is, who do you think are 1 to 2 people in your network that would benefit from jumping on a MindStand pod?
Oh my goodness. You got to spend some time on LinkedIn. But, the powerhouses that I've been following, Janice Gossam, Dr. Gossam, Madison Butler, Elizabeth Liva, like these are no hold back, straightforward educators, right? And Farzine Farzad of Critical Equity Consulting. These are my online professors, right? As consultants, as practitioners, we have to build a community. I'll send you a whole list. There's just a lot of amazing people out there that need to either be on stage, need to be leading these webinars, and start thinking of ways in which they can be compensated as well. That's a key thing in these speaking engagements. And it's one thing to have thought leaders come on and invest their time, but let's make sure that we're creating win-wins in these opportunities for people, because they're bringing their expertise, their knowledge, their emotional labor into these webinars, into these speaking engagements, and they will change your life. But I'll send you that list.
Well, thank you, Zoe. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for jumping on the MindStand pod.
Yeah.
Tune in for the next episode. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I love to collaborate with you. I don't even have my earrings or my face on or nothing,
You look great, I promise.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Take care.